Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today I wanted to talk about something. It was a topic which I've been thinking about for a while, and the recent announcement and release by the Perrys of a set of figures has made me think about it again and really and decide to put it down in a video. So this kind of belongs with the artillery phase video and changes to black powder and maybe other raw systems as well that could be brought in. And basically it's a use for those vignettes or those sets that don't readily look like you could use them, but you know, they're quite cool and they'd be good to have on the battlefield. So the one in particular that I'm thinking of is on the screen now, and it's the new set by the Perrys of Wellington and his general staff, and they're at a briefing or something like that, maybe a planning meeting, and you've got the Duke, you've got General Hill and Paget and all these people there, and the idea really is these cool little vignettes, these extras, which always look really appealing, but you're like, well, I could buy them, or I could buy 2 more packs of cavalry or a regiment of infantry, something that I'm actually going to use, so I can't really justify buying those things. Well, this episode really is about finding a way or introducing some rules that will allow you to use those things. Kind of really so you can justify buying them to yourself. Now, the rules I've come up with, they're suggestions. They're ones that I think will add something to the game, but hopefully not create something that's too unbalanced. There's one which I think might be a bit strong, and I'll talk about that when I get to discussing it. But the idea is that these are those little vignettes, those little extras that we can add to the battlefield, make it look cool. Those of you who see my battle reports will know that I love adding smoke and things like that. So I'm a big fan of, adding all these extras to the Napoleonic battlefield. I just think that when you come to parting with your money, sometimes it's a bit like, it's 20 quid for that wagon or something like that. And it's, that's money that could be spent elsewhere. Well, as I say, hopefully this will give you some ideas for using them on the tabletop. So first off, I wanted to talk about the blacksmith. Now, if you look on the screen now, there's a couple of companies that do blacksmiths. The Perrys, of course, and I think Eureka do as well. So I'll be cycling through the pictures here. If I remember, I'll put in the description which companies do which models with timestamps. That's as if I remember to do that. So the idea of the blacksmith that I had was, the night before the battle, the colonel of one cavalry regiment. So he turns around and says to his men, tomorrow we've got a great battle coming up, and I know you normally would sharpen your swords the night before the battle, but today we're going to make them extra super sharp. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a cavalry commander, of course, it could be an infantry commander. We're going to sharpen our bayonets and our short swords if they're grenadiers or something like that. So basically you get the blacksmith model and you put it next to one of your units. Now with all of these additional units, I'm going to call them, with them all, you put them next to a unit or possibly a commander at the start of the game when you deploy them, or you attach them to them if they start off the table. Then when the unit comes on the table, then you add it next to them. It doesn't actually really do anything on the battlefield. It's just really a counter, so it can't be attacked or blown up with cannons or whatever. So you get the blacksmith model, you put it next to one of your units, and the first time that unit fights in hand-to-hand combat, then the enemy is at -1 to their morale save. You could make it -2, I think that's a little bit strong. But yeah, they're -1 to their morale save, and that represents the extra cutting power of these extra sharp weapons. It'd be particularly devastating on units of heavy cavalry because they've got quite a lot of attacks. And it's assumed that after that first round of combat, the extra keen edge on those swords has been blunted by the bashing and battering that the enemy have taken. So when that's happened, you remove the blacksmith model from the table, and that's going to be a theme to all of these unit attachments. Once they're used, most of them are going to be once per game. One of them's multiple times, but once they're used up, you just remove them from play. So the idea is that they're a counter to remind you and your opponent that they're in play. And as I said in the introduction to this video, it's just an excuse to get them on the tabletop, really. So that's the blacksmith. Now, the next one is the blacksmith's cousin, I guess you could say, the farrier. Now, for those of you who are not aware, blacksmiths were and are people who do general metalworking, whereas a farrier is someone who looks after horses, so particularly horseshoes is particularly their thing. And because horseshoes are their thing, at the start of the game, then you attach the farrier model to a cavalry unit. Now, this has to be a cavalry unit. Unlike the blacksmith, that can be cavalry or infantry, or artillery if you really wanted it to be. The farrier has to be just cavalry. Obviously, he's not going to do horseshoes on the men, is he? So the farrier, you place it with a cavalry unit, and the first time that unit is ordered to move, if it passes its command roll, then it automatically gets to move 3 times. So if you pass it on the strategy rating, or 1 less for argument's sake, then you still get to make the 3 moves. It's kind of like a follow me, but you can give it to a unit in addition to follow me, or you can do it whenever. But it has to be the first time they move. Again, once they've gone over ground, the horseshoes are loosened and things like that. So it's that kind of thing where you can either leave the cavalry in reserve and use it, or you can smash them forward on that first turn and really get in the enemy's face, and maybe when they weren't quite expecting it. So I think that adds like a bit more of a dynamic element to the game. Again, because you've got your farrier model on the table, the opponent's not going to be caught completely unawares. They should hopefully see this. And as with all these rules, because they're optional, of course, discuss them with your opponent before you play. Don't just be like, oh, yeah, I'm going to use this, and these are the rules for it. Discuss them with your opponent. I would recommend that you use 1 or 2 of these attachments each. Certainly balance them out. You can either use the same ones. I think different ones would be better. But, the idea is that they're to add an extra fun element to the game, not to create an all-conquering, super powerful army. So, the farrier, stick him next to the unit. The first time that unit moves, they get to automatically move 3 if they pass their command roll. If they fail their command roll and don't move, then they just don't move. You don't use it up because they haven't moved anywhere. So, you use it the first time they successfully ordered, then you remove it from play. Same as the blacksmith. It just means that the counter's there, it shows they've got this effect, and then when they've used it, you take it away. So that's the farrier. Then for the third special unit attachment, this one's, there's a lot of different things that this is going to cover, but it's basically sort of troop well-being. Let's call it that. So the models that I'd recommend are something like a Cantiniere for the French, or the Wurstwagen for the Austrians that the Perrys make, or a field kitchen, any of that kind of thing. The camp set that the Perrys also make for the British, that's quite a recent addition. Anything like that, really, that gives them that sort of, that feeling of not just being relentless killing machines, they are also human beings as well. So it's that idea of that camp life. So I'm going to probably refer to it more as the Wurstwagen, because that's my favourite way of saying it. But as I say, this covers things like Cantiniere or all that other stuff. So it's dependent on which army you're taking, of course. And the idea here is that you put it with the unit at the start of the battle. Then the first time the unit is called upon to make a morale test, then you can use the Cantiniere or the Wurstwagen, whichever one it is, and you can re-roll 1 or both of those morale dice. So the idea here is that it allows you a lot more leeway than just a straight re-roll, because you can decide to just re-roll. You roll a 6 and a 1, you can just re-roll the 1. So it really allows you for that, and I think it's going to be pretty good. It's going to mean that unit with 0 casualties that was supporting another unit that's evaporated. Hopefully it'll mean that they won't break as well when you roll that 3 or 4. But it also, you know, I don't think it's super powerful. You use it the first time that you take a morale test. So if you don't use it, so the first time you take a morale test, you discard the Cantonary or the Verswagen. You take the model off the table and you get to reroll one or both of the dice. Once it's gone, it's gone. So it's that thing of it's the first one and you can only use it once. So I think that balances those ones out, hopefully. The idea is that, you know, it's the men sort of remembering the comforts of home, the things that they're fighting for, you know, all that good stuff. So that's the Cantonary Verswagen. So we're going to move on now to another one, which is the Ambulance. Now this one I'm slightly concerned is a little overpowered because this isn't a one use only one. This is going to be a constant one. Now the French get slightly better ones. They get Baron Larry's Flying Ambulance. Everyone else gets things like Wounded Wagons and things like that. There's a very nice Russian model of a carriage with the wounded in. So they get those. And the Ambulance allows you to re-roll all ones of your saving throws. So that's pretty strong, especially if you're something like the Old Guard. Then you can have the reroll ones, and you've got a 2+ save if you're in column. So that can be pretty strong. However, if one of your rerolls is also a 1, then the Ambulance is full and it gets removed from play. So that's the counter to it there. You can use it, you know, you can keep using it. If you roll lucky, you can use it for the whole game. But eventually that luck's going to run out. You're going to roll a 1, you're going to roll another 1, and then, you know, it goes. Chances are it might be even beyond that first roll. Now, the difference between the French and everyone else's, because the French have got the Flying Ambulance, they can attach it to cavalry or infantry. And everyone else, say the Russian Wounded Wagon, that can only be attached to infantry because it's too slow to keep up with the cavalry. I should have said for the Cantonary and the Verswagen and things like that, then that has to be for infantry because they're quite slow. They're big heavy wagons. They're not drawn by thoroughbred horses or anything. So that has to be infantry. And the Ambulance also has to be infantry. Unless you're French, you can have it with cavalry because you've got Larry's Flying Ambulance, which was a lot lighter, and they actually had pretty good horses. They had one of the best picks of horses. I mean, being an Imperial Guard doesn't hurt. So they can go with cavalry, everyone else infantry only. So the next one, now this is going to be quite an interesting one because I think a lot of people are going to own these, certainly more so than the others, because it's just kind of part of Napoleonic warfare, really. And that's Cassians. Now, there's rules in Black Powder for limbers. So the limber is what you attach the gun to move it about. There's rules already in place for that, so that's fine. A Cassian is like a long, thin wagon that would go around with the guns, and that would carry the ammunition and the powder. Now, I could be wrong in this. It's my understanding that you would have, for every 2 guns, you would have 1 Cassian with shot in, and then I think it's for every battery you would have an extra one with the powder in. Now that could be the other way around, but I'm fairly sure that's how it works. I'm certain that there will be people who know for definite on here, but I think that's right. I think it's every other one. Every other gun had a Cassian with either shot or powder, and I can't remember which way around it was. And then there was a higher one for every battery that had the other one. Yeah. So the idea of the Cassian is it provides a lot of ready ammunition for the artillery. So at the start of the game, you attach a Cassian, or a Cassian, I've also heard it referred to. I'm from the north of England, so I call it a Cassian here. You attach it to an artillery battery, and then once per game, you can discard the Cassian and fire for a second time that turn. So it basically gives you 2 shots that turn. However, there are some restrictions to this. You can only fire twice per turn if it's not closing fire and it's an enemy that's on medium or long range. And the idea of that is that you just wouldn't have time to reload a cannon quickly enough when the enemy are charging you or when they're right on top of you. Now, I'm sure there's going to be people out there who say, well, you can load a cannon a lot quicker than you think you can. It takes 30 seconds or something like that. But yes, I get that, but it's also a game balance thing as well. Now, if you're playing using the house rules that I introduced in Do What with Artillery, a modest proposal, there should be a link in the top corner here. If you're playing with those rules, then there's another change in that the second shot, the second round of firing, comes in the shooting phase, not in the artillery phase. So the idea of that is that you can't use it to soften up the enemy even more before your charge goes in. Again, it goes back to that time factor. You're not going to have a super heavy bombardment of the enemy before your cavalry get in there. But, it is also a game balance mechanism as well. It means that the enemy's not going to be disordered almost for definite when that cavalry goes in, things like that. So there's a bit of a balance mechanic in there as well. So the Cassian, or the Cassian, whichever way you want to pronounce it, stick it with a battery. When the battery chooses that it wants to fire a second time that turn, remove the Cassian, and it's lost that ability then. All the ammunition in there has been used, all the powder, so it gets sent to the rear to go and reload. So the next attachment that I want to come up with is from it's from a set of figures that Gringo 40 do, which is a set of they have an Napoleonic range which is quite weird. It's got some nice Mamelukes in there. It's got all the Murats in there. Like, you want a Marshal Murat, that is the place to go. They've got hundreds of them. But they also do a really nice set of French engineers. I was like, well, they're cool figures. What can we do with them? Well, I'm going to suggest that they could either build defences during the game or tear down defences during the game. Now, yes, it's a little bit silly. You're not going to create a giant wooden fort in the middle of a battlefield. Now, I'm going to suggest that they could also build pontoon bridges. Again, you probably wouldn't do that in the middle of a battlefield. But you know what? It's fun. They're cool models. Let's see what we can do with them. So, put them with a unit, as per. Now, they've got to be with infantry because they're not mounted on horses. So, place with an infantry unit at the start of the game. Now, you can issue an order to that unit that lets them fortify their position. So, the idea there is that you remove the engineers and suddenly your troops are in field defences. So, they're going to get +1 or +2 to their morale rating, depending on sort of how powerful you want to make it. I'd probably make it a +1. My suggestion would be for the Russians. Now, the Russians were big into building flèches, they were called. So, wooden redoubts almost. You're going to be able to put them with artillery if you're Russian. So that's a change there. And they are going to be able to re-roll that strategy rating roll if they fail. So if they roll, I don't know, a 9 and they're only strategy rating 7, they get to roll that one again. Because it was so typical for the Russians to do that. Now again, I'm not going to pretend that this is super historically accurate. That's not what this article is about. This is about just having fun with some extra figures and having some cool effects. You could also order the unit to build a pontoon bridge. So that could be an order that's given to them. And, if they successfully pass it, then they build a bridge, obviously, over a river. Now, if the river's impassable, it lets the river be passable in that section. If it's, not impassable, but it slows you down, then maybe it can speed it up away. We often play with rivers that it takes one move to get to the near side of the riverbank, an extra move to cross the river, and then the third move you can go as normal. So you might just say, well, you can go straight to the far side of the river and then move on as normal. So it only takes 2 moves to cross the river instead of 3. You could do it something like that. If it's a big river, you could say, well, we'll do it the traditional way of move up to the riverbank, then across, and then third move you get to go, because otherwise it would be impassable. So I think that's, there's different ways you can do that. If you're Austrians, there might even be rules that you introduce for sending windmills floating down the river to smash the bridges. They actually did that at the Battle of Aspern-Essling. So yeah, who knows? You could expand it out on there. The idea is with this is it's just a bit of a toolbox to give you some ideas for adding these cool figures to your armies. So the final one, and the one which inspired this article and also created the most difficulties, are staff teams. Now, one of the first sets from the Perrys for my Napoleonic army I bought is the one that's on the screen now, which is the French staff team. It's an awesome, awesome set. I really like it. I've always thought, like, oh yeah, it'd be cool to use it for something, but I never really know what to use it for. So I thought, well, what I'll do is you attach it to a commander at the start of the game as normal, and then he can re-roll a failed order by, as per normal. You remove it from play, and then you get to re-roll the order. Great, fantastic. Unfortunately, Volume 2, or Version 2 of Black Powder kind of sunk my boat there, because it meant that you can get the re-rolls from your divisional commanders or your corps commanders anyway. So I was like, okay, so I sort of, took it back and had a think. And the reason why, I really was excited about this is because not only have I got the French one, which I'm super pleased with, I also found a company that do a Russian one, which is super, super crazy. Big fan of that one. You can see my my painted up version on the screen. It's also got there's now obviously the Duke of Wellington set that I talked about at the beginning. You could also do the set of like Napoleon. I think he's leaning over a map table with Marshal Ney. You could use that as well. So there's a whole load of different models that you can use out there for staff teams. You could either just use them as regular generals, but I think that's a bit of a waste. That's a bit of a shame. So what I would suggest is you get your base of staff teams, and the rule that I propose for them is that you -2 from your command roll. So for one turn. So at the start of the turn, before you've issued any orders with that commander, you say, I'm going to burn my staff team, as it were, and you remove the staff team from the table, and for the rest of that turn, you -2 from that commander's dice rolls. Now, what I'm going to suggest is, if you're Prussian, then you -2 from your staff rolls. Fine, right, no issues. Now that means that you can't blunder, because a 12 becomes a 10, which isn't a blunder. Fine. If you're not Prussian, then I would suggest that you -2 as normal, but if you roll a 12, that still counts as a blunder. And that's really to give the Prussians a bit of a bonus for the crazy ability that the Prussians had for doing staff work. Now that may actually be a bit later that they did that. Certainly during the Franco-Prussian War and the First World War, they were renowned for their staff work. So, it might be a little ahistorical, but, it's a bit of fun. This whole article is about having a bit of fun. So, that was my idea for staff teams, -2 from your command roll. You give them to a general at the start of the game, and when he uses it, you remove it from play. So, that's some ideas that I've had for using these optional extra unit attachments. It's a bit of fun. I've been through quite a lot of different things. I'm going to put them all in a document, and I'm going to upload that onto the Napoleonic Wargaming YouTube Facebook page. So there you go, that's a bit of a mouthful for you. I'll put a link in the description. So if you want to get a hard copy, print out and talk about the club, or I've gone through quite a lot and you can't remember, then just have a look on there. Join the Facebook group while you're there as well. It'd be nice to see you. It's where I do my announcements, things like that. I've also got a Twitter account. I don't really use Twitter very much, so I'm a bit of a boomer when it comes to that. So I'm still using Facebook. So come and join us on there. That's where I make the announcements of episodes and things like that. Please like and share the video if you enjoyed the content. Have a chat with the guys at your club or your regular opponents and see what they think about the ideas. If you've got any extra ideas of unit editions that I've missed, then stick them down in the comments. That would be great to read some other ideas. If you think that my ideas are no good, they can be improved on, then stick those down in the comments as well. And if you do use them in a game, please let me know how it goes, because I'm going to be playtesting them in my next game, which I was hoping was going to be at Partisan again, but it looks like that one's fallen through, unfortunately. So we're looking at the next game. It's probably going to be French and Russians for the next big one, but I might have a couple of smaller ones before then. But yes, so if you use the rules, please let me know how they go, what you think of them. Thank you very much for listening so far. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll speak to you next time. Goodbye.